Welcome to the Learning Styles and Their Impact on You lecture. This is an introduction to how you learn best. And this is one of my favorite lectures during the entire semester because students everywhere have been trying to learn in ways that may not be the best ways for them. We've all had that friend that could just come to class and listen and never take any notes and pass all the tests. Or maybe you have that friend that has to take notes and study the notes and copy the notes over and over and over again in order to do well. Maybe you're somebody that you've tried a lot of different techniques as you would hear what works for other people, but you've never really found what works best for you. So today's lecture is going to be about how you can start identifying your particular learning style and how you can use that to help you learn more effectively. First of all, learning styles are a lot like a fingerprint. Everyone has one, but no two people share the same style. Within the same household, you may have people that have some commonalities when it comes to learning, but there's also some uniqueness to each person. By definition, learning styles refers to that preferential way that people learn, and it differs from one person to another. It also refers to those various approaches or ways to learn. And how a person's able to learn and remember information is always also considered as their learning style or learning preference. So again, once you discover yours, it's going to make a huge difference in your life. There are different types of learners. There are the visual learners, there are auditory learners, there are tactile kinesthetic learners. And we're going to talk about each of these individually. And I want you to remember that there can be combinations of these. You may be more of a visual learner in some subject areas, but an auditory learner in others. So as we go through each of these different types individually, I want you to make sure you've got some paper with you and a pen so that you can be jotting down some things that you see and recognize about yourself. Now, the first thing I want to talk about before we talk about each individual type is what it means to be a visual learner. A visual learner is someone who needs to see something in order to learn it. And that can be in a lot of different formats. And we'll talk about those when we talk about them individually. An auditory learner is someone who needs to hear something in order to remember it. And a tactile kinesthetic learner, we used to separate these and now we put them together. A tactile learner is someone who needs to touch something in order for it to make a direct connection to their brain. So, in fact, we found that there's extra sensors on the tips of the fingers of those that are truly tactile learners. If they can touch something, it makes a direct connection to their brain. Kinesthetic learners are people that need to move in order to learn. So we're going to talk a lot about how movement can help you learn something. And you've probably been doing some of these things already to help yourself if you are a tactile or a kinesthetic learner. All right, so we've mentioned this statistic before in one of our very first videos of the semester. 90% of college learning goes on outside of the college classroom. That means you're in charge of most of your educational learning opportunities. When you were in a high school setting, you spent all day in your classes. And then you went home and many of you had not much homework to do. So 10% of your learning was happening outside of the classroom. 90% was happening inside. Well, college is that paradigm shift. Now you're in class, when you first signed up for your first semester of classes, you probably noticed, oh man, I just have to take a few hours of classes a day and then I'm done. And you might have thought that was extra work time or whatever. But honestly, the reason you're in class less is because you need to be spending so much more time after class trying to prepare for class, reading those chapters that are assigned, doing homework, copying your notes, recopying your notes, typing your notes, whatever your situation is, studying for tests. So 90% of your education is happening outside of class. Now, that can be a little frightening. You're like, I'm not good on my own. Now I'm responsible for 90% of my education. What was my tuition for? You can do this, all right? It just means that you've got to study how you learn most effectively, and learning styles are going to help you do that. Because if you'll learn how to study more effectively, you're going to spend a lot less time on studying. And what you are studying or reading, you're going to remember because you are approaching it in the appropriate style for you. Knowing how you learn best can help you be a more effective learner. I mean, we all start the semester and our goal is to make all A's in our classes and to go to class and make sure we do everything we're supposed to. So make sure your study time will be used efficiently. And if you're using it efficiently and effectively, then your retention of material is going to be more successful, which is going to result in better grades and a more promising future. So spend the time here at the beginning of a semester getting to know how you learn best and the most effective skills for studying. Spend that time, and then you're going to have a more successful semester. So as we discuss each type of learner, I want you to jot down those characteristics that you recognize as being applicable to you. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about are the auditory learners. And it used to be that the auditory learners were the majority of students way back in the day. Okay, they could just listen and they would understand things and they would learn better. Fewer people are auditory learners today. So if you're an auditory learner, you want to hear information being spoken. You're the person that can absorb a lecture with little effort. You may not even need to take a lot of notes in order to learn because you're hearing it. Auditory learners will usually avoid eye contact in order to concentrate. So they might be the person that gets a lot of grief about not making eye contact. If you're talking with someone, if they're talking to you, you may be looking away. They think you're not paying attention, but you're doing that to concentrate. Auditory learners, if they're going to get instructions, let's say you wanted to get directions on how to go somewhere. Well, if someone is going to tell you the instructions, you literally want them to tell it to you. You want it to hear that voice. You're not the person that wants them to draw it out. You want to hear them. If you're using your GPS app on your phone to get to a place you haven't been before, you want to hear that person talking to you. It's not, sure, the map might be nice, but you want to hear what the person is telling you to do. If you're an auditory learner, you may find yourself reading things aloud. So if you're reading a chapter or you're reading instructions on how to assemble something you've bought, you'll find yourself reading out loud. Because again, remember, if you hear it, you will understand it and remember it. Auditory people sometimes, not all auditory people are this way, but sometimes they want to have a background music when they study. That's very different from somebody that just wants to have music. For auditory people that need music, they need to hear that music because it helps them to focus. So remember, auditory learners are all about hearing it. If you are taking a test in biology, and you have one of those questions, I want you to list the 4 parts of some body process. We all had that experience where we could remember 3, but we couldn't remember that 4th. Well, auditory learners will, when they're trying to remember what that 4th one is, they will hear the teacher's voice during lecture about those 4 processes. Or they will hear themselves reading their notes. And that's how they'll remember what that 4th item is. All right, visual learners. Many people are visual learners today. Visual learners want to see information. They love pictures, diagrams, cartoons, demonstrations, anything that will help them get a visual, and that helps them learn. They can picture words and concepts they hear as images. They're easily distracted in a lecture that does not have any visual aids. If you've ever been in that course where there was no PowerPoint or the teacher never wrote anything on the board, they just talked, then visual learners really struggled because they were distracted because they couldn't see the information. They can be overwhelmed with too many visuals that accompany a lecture. They benefit from charts, maps, notes. Flashcards are sometimes effective tools for studying if you're a visual learner. Again, people will rewrite their notes. My daughter, for whatever reason, will rewrite her notes in red like 5 different times, but something about the red helps her remember. Sometimes visual learners, if they write something on yellow paper, will remember it. Visual learners feel very frustrated when teachers simply give oral instructions for an assignment or a test. They want to see it in writing. They want that assignment page. They want that review sheet. They're the people that are going to take a lot of notes during class lectures and discussions so that they can review them later. They need to see it. They're also the list makers. They'll have daily goals, they'll have activities, whatever, but they're going to make a list. They can go to the store and have forgotten their list, but they can envision it, they can see it in their mind. Visual learners in a biology test where you have to name the 4 body processes and they can't remember that 4th one, a visual learner will picture where that information was in their notes or in their textbook, or they will remember that the instructor was standing at a certain place in the room or had on that blue dress. All of those things are because they remember by visualizing. The final type of learner is kind of the most exciting because these are the people that have gotten a lot of grief in a traditional classroom over the years. Tactile learners need to touch something as their primary mode for taking in information. So in traditional lecture situations, they should be writing out important facts. If you're allowed to use a laptop, think about what happens. You are touching the keys as you type the words, and you are making a direct connection to your brain. The same is true for the kinesthetic learners because it's movement. If they can move, they can learn. When both of these types of students were in elementary and were learning to read, the teacher would say, put your finger under the word and follow along as I read. And the tactile or kinesthetic learner was doing great in reading and comprehension. When they stopped doing that, some of them fell off, their grades fell off, and their reading skills fell off. They'll create study sheets connected to vivid examples. They might also be the people that doodle in their notebook while they're taking notes. They're very hands-on. They like working with their hands. They want to feel and touch everything. In fact, they still remember the class where the teacher passed around an object that could be touched and worked with. And they still remember that information because they actually got to touch it. They're great in lab. Lecture class doesn't make sense, but they go to the lab and now everything's making sense. Kinesthetic people are frequently in motion. You're the fidgeters. You're tapping your pencil on the desk. You're shaking your leg. You are the people that went and were always at the pencil sharpener, sharpening your pencil. And it was always during the lecture because that's when you could actually focus, was when you were sharpening your pencil. You can easily get restless and distracted during lengthy class lectures, reports, or discussions. So it's all about the movement. You probably also, if you're on an important phone call, you are walking and walking and walking because while you're walking, you are able to focus and concentrate. Situations that can affect your learning style is going to be the focus of our next part of the lecture. Please make sure that you can identify yourself as one or combinations of those different learning styles because it's really going to help you going forward.